Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Susan Pyne, and I'm a Senior Access Developer with IT Impact. I'm also the Chapter Coordinator for the Access User Groups. So you see my email here. If you have any ideas that you'd like us to discuss in future meetings, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. We're always looking forward to hearing back from you and getting some feedback on the meetings. Okay, so tonight's meeting, I'm going to talk to you about converting a 32-bit access system into a 64. So let's look at the considerations you need to think about first to get started. Okay, so what are the advantages, firstly, of doing it? Well, there's only one really major one that I know of, and this is that the 64-bit works much more efficiently with larger sets of data. So obviously, you've got big companies, they've got lots and lots of rows of data that they need to process. Certainly, moving to a 64-bit environment can help them there. But you also need to have a 64-bit operating system installed to allow you to install 64-bit Office. It's not really an issue nowadays. Most computers come with a 64-bit operating system. You can only have one version of Office installed at a time on a computer. So if you are going to be doing a conversion, obviously you're going to need both installations so that you can actually run and work your code in the 32-bit environment and then use the 64-bit to test. So if you have a problem where you don't have two computers that you can run alongside to test on there, you can also use have the option of using a VM to install the 64-bit. And of course, the customer that you're creating the database for, you've got to consider if all their users are going to be using 64-bit. It may be that they're doing a gradual rollout, in which case you need to make your code compatible with both environments. And I'll show you how to do that in our demonstration shortly. So let's just go over what the changes that are required. Once that you've decided you want to move to a 64-bit environment, there are a few steps that need to be considered. Now, first of all, for a local access database, where all your tables are running locally in Access, in most cases, it's simply a matter of recompiling the database. So you decompile, recompile within the 64-bit environment, and then the file will be ready to use. However, if the application links to an ODBC or other data source, you will need to provide drivers that match the bitness of the Access application. Now, fortunately, whenever a 64-bit version exists for the driver, there's usually no need to update the connection string of the linked tables. So that should all run smoothly once you install the new drivers. If you use ActiveX controls and COM add-ins, then they also need to match the bitness. Now, the API declare statements, that is what we're going to go over tonight. That's where you need to do the modifications in your code. Unfortunately, API calls on VBA are fixable. You don't need to worry about the availability of 64-bit counterparts. Microsoft have already made most APIs available on the 64-bit platform. However, you will encounter two major issues when you use the 64-bit version to run existing 32-bit solutions. And the first one being that the native 64-bit processors cannot load 32-bit binaries. You can expect to run into that issue if you have existing Microsoft ActiveX controls and existing add-ins. The 32-bit VBA does not have a pointer data type, and because of this, developers use 32-bit variables to store pointers and handles. Now, these variables now truncate 64-bit values returned by API calls when using declare statements. So again, later on, we'll go through that in a bit more detail. So let's bring up some code for you to see. Okay, so here we have some basic code, a declare function in 32-bit. Built for 32-bit environment. Okay, so what we need to do is understand what parts of this code need to be modified. Now, you may not the main thing you need to know is that all Windows 32 Win32 API functions are always documented by MSDN. Okay, so you can get more information. And the tricky thing is that they're free to give different names to what is the actual definition, in this case the function API shall execute. So it's no good really searching on this name because obviously in other code it may be named differently. So what we're interested in is the alias. In this case, shall execute A. So let me bring up my Google window. I've already done a search on this one. So you see here. Now, okay. If you have a look now, we have the C# code here. Okay. And if you look at the names, they're the same, but the data types aren't. You see, we've got L operation as string, they've got L operation as LPC_str. We need to remember here that in C#, the data types are named before the actual name. In VBA, we name the data types afterwards. Okay, so what we want to know is the mapping of these items. Now, basically, in the declare functions, you only need to concern yourself with the declarations as long, because we want to know if they are pointers and need to be converted to long PTR. The string values, you don't need to worry about those. Okay, so let's go back again, bring up that window. So the first long we've got is the HWND. Okay, and here we have it. And this is the data type for it in C#. So now what we need to do is go to the MSDN website and find the, let me bring up my website link. Okay, the data type. So that's this one. Let me just launch that site. And I'll bring this back up. And I want my other website. Okay, let's just open it up here. Let's see if I just put in Windows. Data. I think it's this one. I will be sharing these links with you as well in the end of the meeting. I will post this presentation on the website so that you can get the information. Okay, so we're going to start here. This is all the data types. So we're going to start now, and what we need to look for is this one. So if we just look for that data type here, you can obviously do a find, but just quickly, HWND, let's go down, and here we are. Okay, so what do we see here? The type definition, handle, HWND. Okay, now first of all, you can see that this is in scream case. So what that means is it's not the primitive type. What we need to do then is continue to look until we get to the primitive type. So the next part to look for is handle. Okay, so we'll just scroll up till we come to handle. And here we are at handle. Okay, again, it's in scream case, so we need to keep going. So this time let's just use the find. Oh, that wasn't it, it's P void. Okay, and I'm just going to go down. That's LP void, it's not the one that we want, P void. Here we go, this is what we want. And now you can see it's the original data type because the void is in lowercase. Okay, and what does it say about this one? It's a pointer. Okay, so obviously in the VBA for 64-bit, it needs to be defined as a long PTR. So I did mention to you we're going to show the code as well, that it can be compatible in both versions. So what I will do first of all is take a copy of this. Okay, and then I'm going to just paste it below. So I've got it there. Now we're going to do an if statement. So we use the hashtag if VBA7, which is the definition for 64-bit, then push that in. Then we do hashtag else. Push that in. And end with the end. Okay. So first of all, the else statement is we're just going to leave the code as it was because then that'll run fine in 32-bit. So it's what it'll do when it comes to this code. You'll say, okay, am I on a 64-bit environment? Run this bit of code. If not, go to this. So all we need to concentrate now is altering the code in the first if statement. Okay, so we've already identified that this one needs to be long PTR. So that's all you do is just put PTR after the code. So then you would go on to the next one that you're identifying, which is the enshow command. So we'll go back to the first code here. The enshow command is an integer. Okay, now we go back here to the data types. And okay, int, it's an integer string, obviously. That's what it said. I just wanted to show you here how the code looks. Integers you don't need to change to long PTR, so that is fine as it is. But we have this long at the end, that does need to be PTR. Okay. So what else do we need to consider in the code? what we need to do is, okay. So as I mentioned, we've added the VBA 7, the else, and the end if to put the declarations in to run for each instance. And we also need to add PTR safe after the declare keyword in the declare statement for the 64-bit environment. So here we're going to put declare PTR safe. Okay. And there we are. That's that code finished now and ready to run on either, it'll run on either a 32-bit or a 64-bit environment. So then what you need to do is just continue looking through your code and looking for all your declare statements and making this same modification. So what I'd normally do is I'd do a search, do a find on declare space, and just look for that, and that will usually direct you immediately to all the areas that you need to focus on. So let's go to another example. Okay, so sometimes an API function makes use of structures. So if you look at this, let's just reduce this window. Okay, and here we have private declare function. Okay, now let's find the page again for this API function. Remember, we're going to use the alias. So we'll get this name here. I'll go back to this website. Okay, go back to Google really. Just put in there. Okay, and there we are. And let's see what we get now for this. Great. Okay, so we've got the declaration here for this function. And the point now where we need to see, okay, this is a Boolean, but what we want to check here is this is a, if you look here in the parameter, it's a pointer to open file name. Okay, so what exactly is this? Let's click on this link. Okay. So now we have the information. Okay, if you look, the open file name structure here, it's very similar to what we have in our API, in our VBA code. Okay, so what we need to do basically now is go through each of these, following the steps that I showed you earlier, and identifying which of these longs need to be converted to a long PTR. So if we take this one, for example, HWND owner, again, that's a HWND, which we know from the prior example that did become a pointer when we went through looking for that and then following through to the primitive type. So we know already that that is a pointer. If you don't recall those steps, all you do is you just go back to this page again, looking at the HWND. I just saw it there. Okay, handle, and then the handle leads you then to the pointer. And basically we need to do that for all of these items here. So let's go now, L structure size. This is D word. So we're going to go now and look for D word. We just want the D word on its own. There we go. Okay. And this is an integer. So we know that this one doesn't need to have the PTR string. Okay, so we'll go for the next one, H instance. We'll look again here, H instance, there we are, and we're going to do a search in this code, H instance, okay, and it takes us back to handle, screen case, remember. So then you'd have to look for that again, and we know what that's going to bring us to. There we are, handle, and this p void. Again, that's going to lead us to the pointer. From there, I'll just show you once more. I've taken us to that one. Oh, missed it. There we go. So yeah, p void until we got to the lowercase, and again, it was a pointer. So we know then that this one too needs to be PTR. And basically, as I've mentioned, you'd go through each of these items, correcting those and finding which are long PTR. Again, I've already got that made up here. Again, I would use the if VBA 7, make the changes in this area, else, and leave those with the original code so that it'll work still on your 32. And for the items they declare then, again, that comes below that, if you'd recall in my code, okay, I'm declaring all these items, and then we have the declare code here. So declare functions. So what we needed to do was to split those up again, include the PTR save. And these were booleans, so they just stay as boolean. There was nothing else that needed changing in there, just in this area above. Okay. Now, that isn't everything. You also have to update calling code. So for example, let me go to the next page. Here, we have some code here that's dim PTR return as long. Okay. Now this code is not going to be okay as that. We do need to change it. PTR return obviously is telling us it's returning a point. It's a pointer. So this does need to have the long PTR code here. And then there is one more item. This one's a bit more trickier, which is in this example code before. Again, sorry, this one above, you would do the VB7 else if. Now, many people make this common mistake. If you see here the L structure equals length OFN. Now, in C#, when it has a size member that is a L structure size, they do the len OFN, which basically tells you how big the structure is, not the length, as you do with when you're identifying the length of a string. So that code will not overflow to 64-bit. And this is because the structures are now aligned differently in 64, and therefore you must change this to be LenB. The size of the structure then is in bytes, which is compatible with 64-bit. So the way that you change that is just by putting the B there in front of the code. Now in this instance, you don't need to worry about doing the if VBA 7 else. You can just change LenB and that will run fine on either version. So that is not a problem. This is just for the sizing of the structure. Okay, I don't have that one. That is it for the code samples that I've got. So basically, this guy is going to be your friend for life, because all you need to do when you're looking for your structures here is you would look here. This is one we didn't do. Oh, that's integer. This is one we didn't do. We need to check the C#, and this is Elcus data, which is an L-param. We'll go into here, put in L-param. There it is. And again, uppercase. We need to keep going and looking further. It should be up to long PRM. There we are, long pointer. Okay. And obviously it's telling you it's assigned long type for a pointer. So it's a pointer and you need the PTR. So let's just go over finally the procedures again. So what is it we needed to do? Okay, so add the VBA 7, hashtag else, hashtag endif, and put in the original declaration in the else branch, and then copy the original into the VBA 7 branch and work on that for the rest of the steps. Include the PTR safe after the declare keyword in the declare statement. Then review each parameters where it is declared as a long and consider whether it should be changed to a long PTR. Any pointers or handles data types should be mapped to long PTR, whereas integer data types such as int and dword should be mapped to long for both 32 and 64 bits. And sorry, excuse me. And then you can look over the with the MSDN site that I gave you to step through those. Okay, what else do we have here? After you've done that, you locate them, locate the API declaration by Googling, locate it in the MSDN article. The name of the function may be aliased, so remember to always look for the alias keyword. And then you're using the data types for the article of the C# data types and searching on those. And then we had the calling code structure, which was the dim PTR example I gave you. You update the calling code that uses the API function. If it has variables that are long but are used with long PTR parameter, return values, and those must be handled by declaring the if VBA 7. Let me get a example to you here. Oops, just take a snipping of this. Okay, so there you are. There's the example of the so you have your dim, your variable name, as long PTR else. Okay. And then the final section was the if you have user-defined types. Let's cancel that, sorry. If you have user-defined types and it contains a size member which commonly is assigned like the iStructure size equals length, then it needs to be updated to use LenB instead. Okay, so that's it for this evening. Again, I will share, that was just some example of the code that I've used tonight and how it was updated. And these are the links, some of the links that I've used, and I will share those with you. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned before, please do not hesitate to contact us.